When you think about Venezuela, there are probably a lot of common themes that come to mind, even more so now with a lot of the events that have been going on recently in the country and that have been reported by international media outlets. And in spite of all of that, I went there. So in this video, I'm going to tell you what I saw and how things are in Venezuela, specifically in the capital city of Caracas in this video. Essentially my first-hand eyewitness account. Let's get right into it. If you're new here, my name is Jonny. I'm originally from the UK, but I've been living and working in Spain for the past 5 years. On this channel, I talk a lot about life as an expat or foreigner, living overseas, managing your money, investing, saving money, and I share a lot of my travel stories on this channel as well. So let's start with the obvious question. How did I, or why did I, a British national living in Spain, visit Venezuela? Well, for those of you that watch the channel and know a little bit about me, it's probably not so unexpected or such a strange reason that I'm about to give, but as you may know, I got married last year and my wife is originally from Venezuela, and prior to getting married we had agreed that we would spend the Christmas and New Year break in Venezuela. I have to say it was like mid-July time as well when we booked the flights, and pretty much the moment we booked those flights, non-refundable return flights, you know, things started kicking off, let's say, and it had me immediately thinking like, wow, was this the right decision? Was this the right time to go? Should we change the dates of travel? Should we even just cancel the trip altogether? Honestly, there were multiple moments of worry and concern from my side. Nevertheless, we went ahead with the trip. Just before we get into the video as well, I want to make it clear this is an independent video. I haven't been sponsored or paid by any company or organization to make this video. This has been done by me purely independently. And so let me tell you about how it all went. So let's start by talking about traveling to Venezuela. The main international airport in Venezuela is Simón Bolívar International Airport, Maiquetía, which is in La Guaira state, about 30 kilometers outside of the center of Caracas. It is a relatively big airport and many years ago had a lot of international arrivals and departures going all around the world, across the Americas and to Europe. But more recently, many airlines have stopped operating flights to Venezuela, either of their own accord, as is the case with a lot of US carriers, or as recently as 2024 because the Venezuelan government has imposed restrictions on direct flights to and from Venezuela from certain countries, as is the case with the Dominican Republic, with Argentina, with Chile, and with Panama. At the time of doing this video, these are the destinations that have direct flights to and from Venezuela. So obviously Spain has direct flights, both Madrid and the island of Tenerife, and these routes are operated by carriers like Iberia, Air Europa, Plus Ultra, and LASA Airlines. You also have direct flights to Lisbon with TAP Air Portugal and Istanbul with Turkish Airlines. And the other well-served destination from Caracas is neighboring Colombia, with flights to both Bogota and Medellin, operated by the likes of Venezuelan airlines Conviasa and Avior, also Avianca, the Colombian airline, LATAM Airlines, and Wingo. Though at the time we were in Venezuela, there was a temporary suspension put on direct flights to and from Colombia. And then some other international destinations with direct connections to and from Caracas include Mexico City in Mexico, Havana in Cuba, Willemstad in Curacao, and Port of Spain in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, at the time of doing this video, the United States, Canada, and Australia all advise against travel to Venezuela. It is ranked do not travel. The United Kingdom similarly advises against all travel to certain parts of Venezuela and advises against all but essential travel to the rest of the country. And whilst nationals of a lot of EU countries and the UK as well can visit Venezuela for 90 days visa-free, they do go through a very strict and tedious immigration process with a lot of questions asked. US citizens, on the other hand, need a visa to visit Venezuela and are likely to be subject to even more scrutiny as well. So you can imagine how I felt when it was time to go through immigration at Caracas when we arrived at the airport, particularly given the fact that my wife and I were separated due to the fact that she was entering as a Venezuelan national, I was entering as a foreign national. Fortunately though, because she got through her immigration queue very fast, she was able to rejoin me as I arrived at the front of my queue after an hour and a half of waiting with only 10 people in front, I have to add. She was able to join me and accompany me as I went through the questioning with the immigration officers. The fact that she was with me, that we're married, I think helped a lot. Also the fact that we had extensive documentation prepared ready to answer any possible questions that came up. So things that came up were things like, what is the purpose of your visit? Like, why are you visiting the country? Where are you staying? They might ask you about your work, your job. They'll certainly ask you for proof of onward travel, a ticket to leave the country. They might even ask you for medical insurance as well. So we had documentation to back up all of these things. Very important for your accommodation is to bring a proof of your hotel reservation with the check-in and check-out dates. Or if you're staying with family or friends, then be sure to have what's known in Spanish as a carta de invitación, which is like an invitation letter. This has to be an original and notarized copy, which can only be done in Venezuela. So that means that you're either going to have to get someone to bring it to you if they're visiting wherever you're living before you travel, or you're going to have to use a service like DHL to get that letter, original copy, sent to you prior to you traveling. And thanks to all of that preparation, I was able to enter Venezuela with no issues. Leaving Venezuela was not so bad. A few of the same questions again, but the documentation this time wasn't really needed. It was something I was concerned about given the time period that we were leaving. To give you an idea, like the airport security is very high. You can find the National Guard like pretty much all around the airport. But one particular day in January, like we'd taken a short trip and we're coming back into Caracas, like leaving the airport in the car. And all of a sudden there's like a big military checkpoint with soldiers and big weapons, let's say, in the middle of the road. Fortunately, we got past without any problems. But yeah, that was interesting to see, let's say. All right, now let's move on to like the experience of being in Caracas. So what really caught my eye about Caracas is something that other people said to me as well, is that it is a city of contrasts. Like, think about any city you've been to, there are affluent areas, there are less affluent areas, and then there are neighborhoods that people would consider to be like middle class, But in Caracas, like the places that one might consider to be middle class, like were very few. Like you would drive through parts of Caracas and you can see like massive houses with really high walls, multiple cars in the driveway, even electric fences going along the top, some of them with private security outside the house or within like a gated community. Literally like something you'd expect to see in like Beverly Hills or Hollywood, like those kind of houses. You got like incredible country clubs nearby as well. I actually had the chance to visit one and play golf there, which was a really great experience. Absolutely incredible. But then literally just kilometers away, you'll find what are known as barrios in Spanish, which are like really small houses, a lot of them going up like hilly parts of the city with like hundreds and even thousands, like just little houses like stacked on top of one another in certain cases as well, that resemble like favelas that you would see in Brazil. So for me, it was just crazy to see like two different sides of the city, and in addition, like the fact that they are so close together as well. Following on from this contrast as well is, some parts of Venezuela still experience regular power outages or loss of water supply. It's less so the case in Caracas, but there are other parts of Venezuela where it does happen quite frequently. So the parts of the country that will go, often, hours or even days without water or electricity as a result of outages. And whilst this of course affects a large part of the population, some of the more wealthy people living in Venezuela are able to kind of avoid those problems because they have their own, generator or mini electrical power unit in their house to restore the power in the case of a power outage. And some of them even have access to like, private water tanks, or able to call up and ask for a literal like tank of water to supply the house for a certain number of liters whilst the outage is ongoing. So yeah, because like a life learning I've had in general is like, how money can often solve a lot of problems for you. And, in the situation I live in, and it's never something serious. It's like maybe replacing like a broken appliance or getting a taxi somewhere if I need to be somewhere in an emergency and time is running out. But in the case of what we're talking about here in Venezuela, this is like next level. Money can solve your problems basically. Internet speeds definitely not as fast as what you're used to in Europe, but in the right places it is possible to get access to good speed internet and be able to work, have video calls, etc. without any problems. Something that my wife told me before we visited was that how much she loves the climate in Venezuela, and that she said, it's never too hot, it's never too cold, and that it's pretty much the same temperature all year round. And I thought to myself, really though? But lo and behold, I go there December, January, and it's amazing, like 25 degrees through the day, drops a little bit at night. But yeah, it's just like constant good weather, like all year round. You've got, of course, like a rainy season, which runs from June to November, more or less, if I'm not mistaken. If there's any Venezuelans watching and can provide more detail about the rainy season, then please feel free to do so in the comments. But yeah, amazing weather all year round as well. Now I'm going to talk about the roads and driving. And even though I never drove and was always the passenger, I can tell you that Venezuela is one of, if not the most dangerous place I've seen when it comes to driving. Honestly, like, the rules of the road are completely symbolic. Like, people run red lights as they please. Like, they might be stopped at a red light, and if they see no cars are coming, they just go straight ahead. No indication when people change lanes. People even drive across 2 lanes sometimes, like it's completely normal. But I think the most unsafe road users are hands down like the motorcyclists. Like, they will just cut in between cars, try and overtake on the right, try and overtake on the left. Like, whatever they can do to get past the traffic, like, they will do it. Like, cut in between really small spaces, like, it's wow. Like, I was stunned just watching this, honestly. Like, it was really scary to watch sometimes. Saying like the general state of the roads as well in a lot of parts of the city is not great, like not very well maintained. Around the airport, actually, they were putting down new tarmac, so they are redoing some of the roads, but honestly, like, uneven roads, just potholes everywhere, like really hard speed bumps as well, like all over the place. So that was interesting. An interesting observation I made as well is that there are very few new cars on the road in Venezuela. Like, the majority of cars on the road, I would have guessed that they were about 10 to 20 years old. But I also saw some really old American cars that must have been, you know, at least 30, 40 years old, possibly even more. Similar to some of the cars that you might expect to see in Cuba. Not as retro as that, but you get the idea. So with that said, probably the 2 most reliable and safest ways to get around, I would say, is either using a reputable taxi service like Ridery. You also have Yummy Rides. Both of these are like Uber style apps, so you can order a taxi and take it from point A to point B, you know, with the whole journey managed through the apps. These services, I've been told, are reputable taxi companies. We used Ridery once to go somewhere, and it was fine. The other way to get around, which will surely be more expensive, but will provide probably a greater level of safety and comfort, are like private chauffeuring services. So if you have a friend or family member in Venezuela, ask them if they have a contact with a chauffeur or a trusted driver, basically. Because I think in these cases, like, if you know the person and trust the person, and then they trust the chauffeur or the chauffeur service, then most likely you're going to be in good hands. Oh, and very interesting as well are the fuel prices in Venezuela. So many people think of like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Russia as like the world's top countries when it comes to oil reserves. Venezuela is actually the #1 in terms of oil reserves. And as a result, filling up is incredibly cheap. I'm going to show you now like one example of how much it costs to fill up in Venezuela. But you can imagine with 1 liter of petrol priced at 50 cents, it's incredibly cheap. This, by the way, is when you fill up at PDVSA, Petróleos de Venezuela S.A., which is the state-owned oil company. And as a side note, it's also under a lot of international sanctions. Now on to food and supermarkets. About 10 years ago, Venezuela went through extreme hardship when it came to securing basic necessities in supermarkets. You know, they're often empty shelves. You know, people couldn't get absolute basic necessities and food. So when we went to the supermarket in Venezuela, I was very happy to see, you know, a lot of different products available, fruit and veg, you know, cereals, chocolates and sweets. It's no longer the case that basic necessities and food are not available. So a couple of the supermarkets I got to visit were Gamma 360, Rio Supermarkets, and Central Madirense. I also got to visit the incredibly popular Farmatodo, which is like a 24/7 place where you can buy food and medicine. To help you understand this a bit more, for my US viewers, this is comparable to like a Walgreens. And for my UK viewers, like imagine a cross between a Tesco Express and a Boots. That's basically what a Farmatodo is. The quality of food in Venezuela as well is incredible. Like just the nutritious value of like the fruit, the vegetables, like it's different. I can't describe it. Like you just have it and it just feels so much more nutritious. Like I really, really like that. And you know, people watching who've been to Latin America, comment and let me know if you have like the same feeling when you visited other countries in Latin America as well. Because I do get the impression, like speaking to people from different countries across Latin America, that just like the taste of the food, like the fruit and veg, it's just of like a different quality to what we get in Europe. Even though, you know, like quality of food in Europe is good. My wife also told me to share with you some of the popular sweet treats that many Venezuelans enjoy. So I am showing them here one by one as we go through. Very important that I do this because we do want to eat these sweet treats and chocolates, but I am prohibited from eating them until I have shown you them all. Now that that's done, we will be enjoying these after the video. What's really interesting about buying food, goods and services in Venezuela as well is that you'll see things listed with like a reference price, and the reference price is in US dollars. However, when you come to the checkout to pay for things, the price will be given in the local currency, which is Bolivars. I have actually some Bolivars that I can show you right here as well. These are the most recent notes. Currency, of course, named after the famous Simon Bolivar. Because yeah, one of the many things, you know, people watching the video may be familiar with is kind of the hyperinflation that Venezuela experienced through the 2010s. And towards the end of that decade, like the dollarization of the economy was something that came to be. And so it is possible to pay for things in US dollars, but you'll have like a little bit of a surcharge, which is probably around like 2 to 3% for the IGTF, which is basically like a tax imposed on the buyer for paying in US dollars. And if you do pay in US dollars, depending on the place, like you can get change in USD, but they may also give you change in Bolivars, depending on where you go. The exchange rate at the time of doing this video is that 1 USD is equivalent to about 50, 60 Bolivars. It changes from day to day, but that's more or less the reference rate. At the checkout as well, something that really surprised me is that whoever is paying will be asked to give their ID number, known as their cédula in Spanish. And this is done for like accounting purposes, basically. But yeah, every time someone makes a purchase in Venezuela, then they have to give their ID number. When it comes to foreigners, it's less so the case. Like when I personally made purchases, like I was never asked for any ID, like no passport number, anything like that. But you know, if my wife bought something, then she was asked for her ID number. And when you go out of the supermarket as well, there'll always be like a security guard standing there who will check your receipt, have a quick look at your bags, and then put a quick stamp on the receipt to show that everything's fine before you can leave the supermarket. In terms of the prices, like I can remember the chocolates and cereals, like a lot of the imported goods, as many of them are imported from like the United States, are more expensive as one might expect than, you know, you might pay in Europe or probably in the US as well. But the price of fruit and veg is much lower, and you can find them at, you know, really affordable prices. Went to a few restaurants while we were out there as well, and you know, you can find a lot of different types of restaurants, so like typical Venezuelan food, but we also enjoyed meals at like an Italian restaurant, and we also had a really nice meal at like a steakhouse as well, which had very good quality food. And the restaurant prices are very affordable as well. Some very good prices when it comes to eating out. In terms of things to like see and do, probably the most popular and most well-known attraction in Caracas is El Avila, which is basically like a mountain, a little bit like a national park, not exactly a national park, but you can ride up there on a cable car. You've got some very nice views over the city. There's a lot of little stalls with people selling like arepas and, you know, different snacks and stuff. But at the top of that mountain as well, there's actually a hotel called the Humboldt Hotel. A lot of people actually stay there, and it's very popular for visitors to either go up there and have, you know, like a meal, whether it's lunch or dinner, or even go up there for like evening drinks or afternoon drinks. And you know, there's actually a lot of people that stay there and reserve like hotel rooms to stay overnight at the Humboldt Hotel and stay there. About 2 hours away from Caracas in the state of Aragua is a place called the Colonia Tovar. And to find a place like this in the middle of Venezuela is like completely unexpected. So it's like a little town with a lot of German style houses and architecture, like it's like a little church as well, and you've got small streets with like lots of little stalls where you got people selling like fruit and sweet things. You've got like German style restaurants there as well. And it's a very like unique place and interesting find within Venezuela, not within Caracas, as I say, but if you have the means to get there and, you know, you want to go and check it out, it is worth going, although it is pretty small, and, you know, probably within couple of hours you've seen everything there is to see there. However, outside of Caracas, Venezuela has 3 popular tourist attractions, one of them being Isla Margarita, which is a very popular island where people go and spend, you know, their summer holidays, I guess we can call it summer holidays with the climate. But yeah, you know, at like Christmas time, Easter, Carnival, during the month of August, a lot of people travel to Margarita, stay in the hotels, enjoy the beaches, the restaurants, and life on the island. It's a very popular tourist destination within Venezuela. You also got Los Roques, which is an archipelago, like a group of islands, basically. And Los Roques is protected and is like a national park. And it's just absolutely breathtaking, like the water, the beaches. You can go island hopping on little boats and enjoy day, afternoon, bit of time in the sun in the Caribbean Sea. And the other popular tourist destination that Venezuela has is the Salto Angel, or Angel Falls in English, near Canaima, which is the biggest waterfall in the world, in the middle of the Amazon rainforest and near the border with Brazil. You can fly there, camp out a few nights, and experience nature at its finest. Now, I went to 2 out of these 3, so do stay tuned, as I will be sharing my experience from the 2 that I went to, and you'll get to see what tourism in Venezuela is like. Now, probably a lot of people, when thinking about Venezuela, will be concerned when it comes to safety. It was certainly one of my concerns as well But from speaking to others and having witnessed it now for myself as well, I can say the security situation has significantly improved compared to what it was 5-10 years ago, let's say. What surprised me as well is that there were people in Venezuela who were telling me about other countries in Latin America, which I will not name for diplomatic reasons, that they considered actually to be less safe than Venezuela is today. That said though, if you are traveling to Venezuela, then do keep your safety and security in mind, because especially like Europeans and North Americans, I'd say the best security or safety measure you can take when you're going to Venezuela is to have like a trusted person there that will be with you at all times, and that, you know, you're always in their company. So, you know, whether it's a friend or like even a family member of a friend, you know, this can all help in you staying safe. And then of course, things that go without saying, you know, try not to draw attention to yourself as a foreigner. Don't be going out with like flashy jewelry or things like that will of course draw attention to you. Be aware of your surroundings, like what's going on, who's around you, all that kind of things. And lastly, if you are going out at night, then again, like go with a trusted person. Like, you know, don't take a ride or get in a car with people you don't know, things like that. Plan your transportation in advance. Use a trusted, you know, either ride sharing service or chauffeur. And so yeah, those are my like general safety tips. So to sum it all up, like, would I go back to Venezuela? 100%, absolutely. You know, had a really great time. My first time visiting Latin America. Fantastic experience, great food. Venezuelan people and hospitality, you know, is some of the best that I've had the chance to experience. And that's not just making it up, you know, like these are really friendly, outgoing people. And looking beyond like what you see in the news, like Venezuela has so much to offer as a country in terms of its nature and in terms of its food. Like it's incredible. I do want to put a small caveat though, and that's that I probably wouldn't solo travel to Venezuela. Like in my case, the trip I do with my wife, I'm very fortunate to have her who can accompany me on such a trip. It's not to say that someone couldn't do it as a solo trip, but you may face extra complications. Like, you know, you might get more questions asked at immigration. You probably need to be a bit more careful when it comes to security, and plan things, you know, very carefully, know exactly what you're going to be doing. So not something for like the average or a beginner traveler, for sure. That's what I'm trying to say here. And so with that, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it interesting. Leave a comment and let me know if you've been to Venezuela in the past, or if you've been thinking about going to Venezuela. I'd love to hear a bit about your thoughts and your experience as well. So guys, till next time, I'll see you on the next one, and let's get this money.